if we were to take away only one thing from the conversation, well, for me it would be that you can overcome anything. That no matter how bad it gets and how hard it is and how much you think that it's a struggle that you need to overcome and beat the odds, that if you put your mind to it and you put one foot in front of the other, that you can overcome all the odds and that you can find the answers and that they're there waiting for you. Just to have the will and the drive to try and find them.
I spent 30 years working in financial services, but my sight was deteriorating over all of that time. And I always promised myself, because I'm a very independent natured individual. And when it got to the stage that I felt I wasn't really making the level of contribution that I wished to, I thought I want to do something different. I don't want to feel I'm underperforming in life.
Yeah.
I can be quite driven.
Yeah.
Not can be, am.
You are.
So it was sort of, I think, fate took a hand, perhaps. And I bought a copy of the Irish Times one day, which was unusual because I'd more or less given up reading newspapers. It was getting so difficult. And then I did something which is even more unusual. I looked at the small ads on the back page, which I very rarely did. And there was an ad in there to train as a psychotherapist at an institution called Turning Point, which I'd never heard of. And so I applied, sent in my application form, did my interviews, did my aptitude tests, and was accepted, and started 6 years of training to become a psychotherapist. I'm imagining, I can only imagine, that shocked my parents when they were told that their son had this condition called retinitis pigmentosa, or P for short, which effectively means that the retina, which is the light sensitive part of the eye, will deteriorate over time and lose its ability to send pictures to the brain. You will lose your sight, you will go blind. I'm just thinking of what effect that might have had on my parents. I don't know, they never told me.
Oh, they never told you it was going to happen?
No, they never told me it was going to happen, nor did they tell me how it affected them. My father died when I was 19, and it was something my mother could never really bring herself to talk about. Although she died at the age of 90, when I was well grown and was inhabiting this chair as a therapist, it was something she could never bring herself to talk about. So I sort of grew up in my early years with a sense that something was wrong. I wasn't quite sure what was wrong, but I had a deep sense that something was wrong that made me different from other people. But I didn't know what it was. And I could sense this in terms of school. I couldn't see the blackboard, or if we were playing rugby, I couldn't always follow the line of the ball, or if I was out late at night, I couldn't see properly in the dark. There were always these little telltales. And initially I was told I was short-sighted and given glasses, but that didn't really seem to solve anything. And because I was told I was short-sighted and here are the glasses, I thought, well, if that's the solution, there must be something really wrong with me if the solution doesn't work. So the fact that I was losing my sight slowly was never spoken about. I didn't feel I had the permission to talk about it. I didn't feel I had the words or the concepts to talk about it. And I'm going to guess that my parents felt a sense of fear, that they didn't know how to approach the subject with his 5, 6, 7, 10, 15-year-old child anyway. So I kind of lost my sight on my own.
Wow.
And I think, yeah, I think very much this led me to become quite an independent individual. I can feel myself becoming quite emotional as I say this. Yeah, it's good because I'm close to it. And I own it. It's part of me. It's part of my identity. That deep sense of loss. And I think probably a deep sense of loneliness at that time too.
What age were you?
I was probably, well, I knew from an early age, 5, 6, 7, that there was something that wasn't quite right. So it's what led me to become that driven, very independent person, because I had to rely on myself in those early formative years. I didn't know how to broach the subject with anyone else. I didn't, as I said, I didn't have the language, the concepts, I didn't know what was happening. So I couldn't find the words to open a conversation. I certainly didn't have the confidence. And I dare say from my parents' point of view, they were so scared, frightened. They probably hoped that maybe my sight wouldn't deteriorate as quickly as it actually did. And I think what happens is, because I didn't know how to speak about it, and they were too scared to broach the subject, it never got spoken about. So we were left, if you like, in a state of silence, and they probably felt, well, he's not saying anything, so things must be okay. And I'm there as a child thinking to myself, well, I can't say anything about this because what can I say? So we actually ended up colluding, not wittingly, not consciously. This wasn't something that was done to hurt me, but it just goes to show that when we don't have a relationship, when we can't communicate with one another, difficult things can emerge and evolve that don't get spoken about. And many of the most important things in life don't get spoken about. And that's why people come to see a therapist like me. That they want to have the conversation that they can't have elsewhere. They want to figure out where the starting point is. They want to find out what the language is. And most importantly, they want to experience the feelings that go along with it. They may not consciously know that when they walk in that door, but that's exactly the journey that we're embarking on. And as I feel my own deep sense of loss, that's a part of my identity that I don't wish to lose. That's part of me. That brings me back to the core of me. It brings me back to my childhood. I don't want to lose that. It's not that I enjoy feeling this way, but it makes me feel real. And one of the most important lessons that I have ever learned in life was a lesson I received very early in my married life, when my wife explained to me that everything in our marriage was negotiable except one thing. So I said to her, what's the one thing that's not negotiable? And she said, good communication.
Ah.
I need to know what's happening in your life, and you must want to know what's happening in mine. And we can work from there. And up until that point, I had probably been rather circumspect about a lot of things. Yeah. And that was probably the starting point in my journey towards, okay, you've got to talk about stuff. Really talk about stuff. And not avoid it, or try and get round it somehow, or hide it, or deny it, or whatever. You have this intimate relationship with this other human being who's saying, talk to me about what you're thinking, about what you're feeling. And now listen to me as I respond to that.
And what are the other elements that make up, there's communication, there's that absolute conviction in the solidity and the concrete grounding of it. What are the other elements of a relationship?
I think you accept the other person for who they are. I'm not perfect, she's not perfect. Who is? What is perfection? This is a human being, so can I accept her for who she is? And will she accept me for who I am? So acceptance is a huge part of it. And I think and nothing is static in that relationship, in the sense that you're growing older. I think in the relationship, you're journeying towards a more spiritual place as you grow older together, and a more forgiving place too. Often we spend our lives in the past or in the future, and we become absentee human beings. We don't live today, we're too busy living the life we should have had, or giving out about it, or hoping for a life that we may have in the future and planning for it, and we're not here and now. So I'm having this conversation with Charlotte. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to have for my dinner tonight, or regretting the fact that I didn't get the lotto numbers right yesterday. So if we're going to communicate, you and I need to be here in this moment. It's not in the past, not in the future, it's only the here and now. And it's the only time that we have personal agency, is the moment, this moment. No other time. We can't change the past. The future never arises. This is the present. This is the gift. That's why it's called the present, as they say. This is the only point in life when I can be alive, touch, be part of existence, and where I can have personal agency now, no other time.
Even though it makes perfect sense, and I completely and utterly agree, the way the human mind works doesn't allow for that. We sit and we ruminate about things, and we kind of reflect back and say, God, why did that happen, or how is this going to happen? How have you trained yourself over the years in order to be able to accomplish that?
Well, I was very fortunate. Sorry, I'm going to instance the Irish Times again. Many years ago I read an article, and there was an ad on the front page of the Irish Times for the School of Philosophy and Economic Science here in Dublin. and I was a young man in my mid-20s, and it looked really interesting because I had a question like, do you find life meaningless? Are you always searching for purpose? Oh, that's me. I'm wondering where's the purpose of life? So I went along, and I stayed for very many years, and I met some wonderful people, including the very first tutor that I had, the late Shane Mulhall, who just passed away recently. And he sort of, I was going to say opened my mind, but he opened my mind and he opened my heart to another way of being. And again, that's a very deep experience for me. And I feel that what I feel now is gratitude. I nearly feel overwhelmed by gratitude. He told us this, what I thought was this wonderful story. One day he came out of Townley Hall late one evening, and he walked out to the front of the building. And I guess it must have been maybe November. And he, there is a pond, nearly a man-made lake at the front of the building. It's this massive area of water. And he looked up at the sky, and he said he saw hundreds of stars. And then he thought, no. There's thousands of stars. And then he thought, no, there's millions of stars. And then he thought, no, there's billions of stars. And then he thought, no, there's gazillions of stars. And at this point he said, my mind got tired. It couldn't comprehend the size of the universe. So he said, my mind turned back, gave up, but my spirit carried on. My spirit understood the vastness. My mind couldn't. So we are more than brains and minds. We are spirit. His spirit was not daunted, his mind was.
What you're explaining to me, and what the majority of people I meet try to explain to me, is that all of this that's around us isn't necessarily what the answer is, and that if you could attach to spirit and attach to understanding how enormous and how much bigger all of this is than ourselves, then maybe we'd have some kind of a connection to what actually matters.
Yes, I mean, when I'm on my deathbed, and if I'm still conscious towards the end, I'm not going to be saying, send for my stockbroker, how am I doing? Yeah. I say, I want to be surrounded by the people who love me. I don't want them to be wearing they don't have to go out and get their hair done or put on their finest clothes. You don't have to have fine wine. I just want their presence. If there was some sort of procedure where I could regain my sight today, I'd have to think about it, because it would change innately who I am, how I relate to the world.
What would you say that if you did have your sight back again, what would be the thing you'd want to see, or one of the things you'd want to see most?
My wife, my daughter, and my friends.
To physically see them?
Yes.
Would it make all that much of a difference?
I feel I know them very well. I feel they know me very well. Is it imperative? No, it's not an imperative. No, I feel we have a very deep connection, and apparently most of the fun things happen in the dark anyway, so I'm told.
And not to be too heavy about it, but sometimes I think I speak to people, and I've had a huge amount of death in my family, and people have told me that when you find the spirit, and when you find this understanding that we are a body with a spirit, a spirit with a body, not a body with a spirit, i.e. that we are maybe eternal, and I don't know what the reality is. I don't know what happens when we're done. I don't think any of us do. Dad's not gone. I'll see him again one day. We'll always be together. Why is it that if anything ever happened to my sisters or my brother, my life would end all over again, even though it's already happened 4 times? And that's another thing that I'm really interested in knowing about. What would you say to that comment? What would you say in reaction to that?
Well, I'm not quite sure who said this, but isn't it grief is the price of love? That you love somebody and then they're gone, so you grieve. You grieve their loss. Whilst we're alive and we're breathing, we're constantly evolving, and perhaps closer towards our death, or maybe even in our deathbed, there is some sort of resolution whereby we feel a deeper connection with the past, the present and the future. It all becomes one, and that sense of loss dissipates. I don't know. I have to find out. I'll mail you when I do. We don't know everything. We can't know everything. We do our best. So it is a great privilege to love another human being. It's so wonderful when they love you back. And when you've experienced the depth of love, what it really means, beyond the rings and the dresses and the fine houses, but what love really means, the depth of that. It's not known to everybody, but that brings great happiness and fulfillment. And I can't see my wife or daughter anymore. I have never really seen my beautiful daughter as a young woman, but I know her deeply, and she knows that. And I know she knows that. I feel that deep sense of connection, which is like Mr. Mulhall. My mind turned back, but my spirit carries on. Have you ever heard anybody say I'm tired spiritually? Perhaps. I haven't. Spirit. And so happiness for me is, and fulfillment is love. I'm very fortunate. I have my family and one or two very close friends that I would love deeply and don't mind telling them, which I think is an important thing too. It's kind of a taboo subject. We're not really very good about telling people how we feel about them.
And I have to say thank you very much for talking to me, because most people couldn't get even close to the depth of what you've spoken about, or just telling the truth, and yet most people will agree with what you're saying. They just haven't found the words or gotten as far on the journey as you have.
Well, the only reason I'm here, Charlotte, is that some people directed me here. And I was fortunate to find companions who walked this journey with me. Didn't do it on my own. Common union, community. The greatest thing we have in common is our shared humanity. If we all understood that, there wouldn't be any war, because I would be fighting myself.
I think you're a very wise man.
Again, if I have any wisdom,
It's been guided.
I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, as they say. People who've gone before me. I didn't invent the wheel. I simply rolled it another foot or two along the footpath.
Coming away from a conversation like that with John is of course humbling, but more than anything, it makes you see the depth of the man and how strong he is, yet in this very, very soft way. And I think that in life we spend our time trying to be warriors, trying to achieve, trying to be the best we can be in order to get to where we need to go. And actually, sometimes the battle doesn't need to be done in such a fearsome way. It can be done by acceptance. We can triumph over the odds that life throws at us by accepting our circumstances and trying to find out what the real answers are. Finding that love that lets you know that everything that you are is already enough, that you don't have to be anything more, and that you're going to be accepted for it, and to walk hand in hand with that person through life, I'm sure, has been what's given him such incredible insights. This is a man that's lost his sight, and he seems to have more than most people I know. I think that the world is so obsessed with the magazines and social media and comparing themselves to the next person, and it's just this whirlwind of comparisons and grappling for more and looking at someone like him, speaking to someone like him, I feel like I have a greater understanding of myself and what life is meant to be about.